The morning sun was spilling across my street the way it always did, warm, golden, harmless. At least, that's what I believed until the sharp clacking of heels on my driveway sliced through the quiet. I glanced out the window, and there she was. Marjorie, our Hoa's self-appointed monarch, was marching with a clipboard like it was a royal scepter. Her face was tight and businesslike, lips pinched as if the universe personally owed her an apology. "Good morning, neighbor," she called, her smile stiff and empty. I swallowed my coffee a little too fast. There was something about Marjorie and energy so suffocatingly exact, it could make even a perfectly trimmed lawn feel guilty. "Morning," I said, as I stepped outside, trying to sound casual. "Everything okay?" "Oh, everything is perfectly fine. If people actually followed the rules," she snapped, swinging her clipboard like a blade. "Except for, well, you." I blinked. Me? What had I possibly done this time? I'd never intentionally broken a rule, mostly because I barely paid attention to them. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said, tilting my head. "You've placed your garden gnomes outside the designated display zone," she hissed. "And that barbecue grill? It's not allowed to be visible from the street. Do you even read the HOA guidelines?" I tried to keep a straight face, though the absurdity pricked under my skin. "Well," I said slowly, keeping my tone steady, "I'm not following HOA rules." Her eyes widened like I'd confessed to grand theft. "Excuse me?" I said. "I'm not following HOA rules. I'm just living," I replied, taking another sip of my coffee, savoring the tiny moment of normalcy. Her jaw dropped. She clutched her clipboard like it was a flotation device. "I need to report this. This is a serious violation," she stammered, her voice wobbling with manufactured authority. Before I could say a word, she snatched out her phone and began dialing. That's when I heard the distant wail of sirens approaching. My stomach sank. She actually called the police over my gnomes and grill. I stood there, feeling the weight of every forgotten neighborhood rule pressing down on me, the absurdity twisting my insides. Anger, disbelief, and through the fog of all of it, one sharp thought cut through. I know this woman. The sirens grew louder, echoing off the clean hedges and pastel houses lining our street. Marjorie's face turned the exact shade of red worn by people who think volume equals authority. She was practically vibrating as she waved her arms, trying to explain my crimes to the two officers who pulled into my driveway like they were responding to a national emergency. "Sir," she says, "I'm not following HOA rules," I told the first officer, keeping my voice calm, almost too calm. "Apparently, my gnomes and my grill are endangering society." The officer nodded politely, scribbling on his notepad while clearly fighting a smile. "Okay, and you live here?" "Yes," I said, stepping forward slightly, projecting quiet confidence, which apparently makes me a criminal in the eyes of my HOA president. Marjorie gasped like I'd insulted her entire lineage. He's ignoring every regulation." "You mean the regulations you made up?" I said, letting a tiny smirk appear. A muscle twitched near her eye. The officers exchanged a look. One crouched to meet Marjorie's frantic gaze. "Ma'am, this really isn't a police matter. HOA rules fall under civil violations, not criminal." He could be fined or sued by the HOA, but his voice faded, the silent implication hanging thick in the air. "She's about to make this worse." Marjorie looked ready to explode. "Well, I'm doing my duty. Someone has to uphold our neighborhood standards. And you called the police. Because?" I raised an eyebrow, fully enjoying the unraveling of her imaginary authority. Then, as if the universe loved comedy, my phone buzzed. I checked the screen and my heart skipped. It was an urgent notification from work. Suddenly, I remembered, I had a surprise performance review scheduled today, and then a horrifying realization hit me. Marjorie works for me. I froze. The officers noticed. Marjorie noticed. Her expression shifted from rage to pure shock. A slow-motion stretch of panic across her face. "Wait," she started. But the words dried up, choked by the chaos she'd set in motion. The cops awkwardly backed away. They had no interest in staying for this meltdown. They left her speechless, my gnomes vindicated, and a storm forming that neither of us had anticipated. I stepped back and let the silence settle. In that moment, I knew something fundamental had shifted, something irreversible. Marjorie's eyes were wide enough to startle small wildlife. I could practically see the gears turning in her head, desperately scraping for a way to recover her collapsing authority, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't just neighborhood tension anymore. This was work, my work, and she had just called the police on me, her own boss, over lawn decorations. I took one slow, intentional step toward her. "Marjorie," I said quietly, letting my voice carry a calm that felt far more threatening than anger. "Do you understand who you're talking to?" Her lips quivered. I thought, you thought what? That HOA rules outranked actual laws? Or your company's chain of command?" The disbelief climbed inside me, blending with a sharp pinch of amusement. She tried to pull her shoulders back, to rebuild her cracked authority, but the attempt failed before it even started. I was doing my job." "Yes, your job," I said, cutting in gently but firmly. "And now your job has just been reviewed." I lifted my phone and tapped through a few screens. Marjorie's eyes flitted nervously as reality settled over her like cold rain. A direct hit to her confidence delivered courtesy of our. Within moments, I had confirmed what she feared most. Her position was officially under investigation. Every complaint about her behavior, her pattern of overstepping, her obsessive policing had reached the right desk. My desk. You can't just," she began, panic breaking through the thin shell of her authority. "I already did," I said, voice quiet. "And you called the police on me. Over gnomes. Tell me, do you understand why that's a problem?" She faltered, stuttered, trying to form a rebuttal, but nothing came out. Her whole posture sagged, shoulders collapsing inward, hands trembling at her sides. The ironclad HOA enforcer was suddenly small, fragile, exposed. Neighbors peeked from behind their blinds, whispers rising like a breeze through the cul-de-sac. I could feel their silent commentary, the barely contained amusement as they watched the downfall of someone who had treated the HOA like her personal kingdom. I resisted the urge to wave. This wasn't about pettiness. This was balance returning slowly, dramatically, almost cinematically. Then, just as a sliver of calm settled, Marjorie's phone buzzed. She snatched it up, desperate for a lifeline, only to find a formal notice from corporate HR staring back at her. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock, then collapsed into outright horror, and at that moment, I knew the story wasn't finished yet. The wind had picked up by the time Marjorie sank down onto the steps of her own driveway. Phone still clutched in her hand, though it had nothing left to offer her. I watched from my porch, a strange mix of disbelief and satisfaction swirling inside me. It didn't feel real. Just hours earlier, she had wielded the HOA like a weapon. Now, she was sitting in the aftermath of her own decisions. Her shaking fingers scrambled across her screen, trying to call anyone, absolutely anyone who might rescue her from the consequences she herself had triggered. I could almost visualize the words floating over her head like a comic bubble. How could this happen? "I was doing my duty, Marjorie," I said softly, stepping down my porch stairs as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the perfect hedges. "It's okay. You did your job. Just in the wrong universe." She looked up at me, eyes wide, pupils blown with panic and confusion. "I didn't mean, no one said you meant harm," I said, keeping my tone calm, almost compassionate. "But calling the police on your own boss? That's bold." Her lips trembled as she tried to muster some defense, some final argument to regain footing, but nothing came. Reality had settled too heavily, like concrete setting around her. By the next morning, HR had officially terminated her. The announcement sprinted through the office faster than gossip at a holiday party. By the time I arrived, quiet laughter and hushed commentary trailed the news like distant echoes. But I didn't brag. I didn't have to. Watching her realize her own overzealous crusade had detonated her career was more than enough. Back in my neighborhood, peace returned, though not without its lingering shadows. The gnome stood proudly in my yard again. The grill gleamed in the sunlight. And yet, the memory of that bizarre escalation stayed with me like a ghost. Every time I walked past the empty space where Marjorie's clipped authority once hovered, I couldn't help the small smirk. Some nights, I swore I still heard the faint echo of sharp clipboard heels in my imagination, a reminder that chaos can strike without warning. And yet, this time, had walked through it calm, steady, and collected. The Queen of Hoa enforcement learned that authority without perspective is a dangerous thing. It was cinematic. It was unreal. And honestly, it was the kind of story that belonged in a YouTube video. For now, though, I simply sipped my coffee on the porch, let the morning sun wash over me, and appreciated the quiet of a neighborhood finally at peace. Lesson learned. Some rules matter, but some Karen moments are meant to be handled with patience, timing, and a satisfying splash of karma. This story made you feel the tension. Hit like because real justice starts when regular people speak up. Subscribe to Karen's Hub to hear more stories about standing your ground and taking back control. And tell me in the comments, how would you deal with a Karen who oversteps?